We start off with breaking news out of Washington, where a gunman was shot and killed during a confrontation with the Secret Service agents near the White House. Multiple journalists working in the area report hearing dozens of gunshots ringing out. Here's one CBS reporter being interrupted by the shots fired.
President Trump promises the prices will go down, but his grip on Republican support on Capitol Hill is weakening.
The suspect reportedly approached a White House security checkpoint, drawing a weapon before firing at the Secret Service agents. A bystander was also shot. The White House, where Donald Trump was inside, was forced into lockdown, which has since been lifted. CBC's Katie Nicholson is in Washington tracking the latest from law enforcement as the investigation continues. So, Katie, we can see you there on the street right now. Tell us what you know about the incident.
Yeah, so I'll just walk you through this. I'm at 17th and H, so we're about a block north from around this checkpoint where this incident unfolded, according to Secret Service. So the whole area is basically still cordoned off, a lot of police tape everywhere, and a heavy National Guard presence. There are multiple law enforcement that are engaged in this investigation right now. So we know from the FBI, the Secret Service, as well as the DC Metropolitan Police are all involved in this right now. In fact, there are just police cars all over the place here. You can probably see some of the flashing lights at the top of this block here. This is about as close as we're being allowed to get right now. So what we do know is at about 6 o'clock this evening, this is when reporters were sort of gathered in that North Lawn area around the Pebble Beach area. That's where they normally are often doing hits, recording things for later the evening, the next day, just sort of like doing a roundup of the news. That's when the gunfire went off. So what we know from the Secret Service, what they're telling us is that an individual walked up to the gate there, pulled a firearm out of a bag, and then opened fire. Then what happened was that eruption of fire that sent so many people running, so many of the media corps running, that sort of prompted that lockdown inside the White House. I did speak to one of the reporters who was there. It's actually quite an arresting photo of her online, Alexandra Ingersoll with One American News. And she sort of talked about how, this is coming a month after the White House Correspondents' Dinner shooting. And she sort of talked about the trauma and sort of the echoes that people are feeling sort of on edge after something like that. I don't know if we have that clip there for you, but if we don't, okay, so we'll just keep going. But that's sort of where her head sort of was as she was leaving once she was finally left out. Of course, the other thing here, Eli, is that the U.S. president was inside the residence. So, of course, that sort of heightens the response at a time like this. You think about the number of times that the president has been the subject of some sort of a plot, an assassination plot. Think about the campaign trail, those two incidents, as well as the DOJ asserts that sort of White House Correspondents' Dinner a week ago, where he was one of the targets that, according to the DOJ, of that shooter. So sort of heightened response here. We don't know the motivations of the individual. That we presume will come in the coming hours as, again, law enforcement continues this investigation right now, Eli.
Certainly a disturbing frequency of these kind of attempts happening in the nation's capital. Thank you so much. That's CBC's Katie Nicholson in Washington. For more, we're now joined by Javed Ali. He's a former White House counterterrorism official who's now an associate professor at the University of Michigan. Thank you so much for making the time with us. Now, it was only, as we've been saying, about a month ago that we were speaking with you about the attempt, the shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. That incident wasn't as close to the president as this time, perhaps, though he was at the White House today. So I have to wonder what you're thinking right now, Ali, and what you make of this incident.
So, Eli, nice to be with you. And picking up on some of the points that Katie just referenced, we're seeing now, unfortunately, this high, or at least a relatively, in a short amount of time, a high number of incidents that ostensibly are directed at President Trump. And this is perhaps only the latest one. So from my recollection, this may be the most we've seen against a either former or sitting president in that rough time frame. We're talking now of a couple of years. So that in and of itself is a notable trend. Now, in terms of the security itself, President Trump was at the White House and on the compound and very well protected inside. And this incident occurred outside the White House complex across the street, I believe on 17th and Pennsylvania Avenue. I know precisely where that's correct, relative to the White House complex. So he was safe the entire time. But again, the fact that we're having another one of these incidents, that's the question security experts are now going to be looking into.
So, Java, can you give us a sense of just how secure are the public streets around the White House? I mean, I think for years, people are used to being able to kind of stroll along those boulevards to take photos in front of the White House. So there is generally, or has been up until now, a certain level of accessibility. Is that a vulnerability now?
So for 30 years, in the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing here in the United States in April 1995, since then, over that 30-plus year stretch, there have been constant changes to the security posture of the White House complex and the surrounding area. Now it is very difficult for anyone who's not credentialed, either White House staff, Secret Service, other folks who have a reason to be on the White House grounds, visitors. You have to be badged and go through multiple checkpoints even to get inside one aspect of the compound. And then even when you're on the compound, there are uniformed Secret Service officers everywhere. So it is inside the White House, and immediately outside it is very secure, but it's still, there are theoretically vulnerabilities outside. Even though this incident was contained outside the incident. But if someone were to try to launch a drone attack or something like that, some kind of standoff attack against the White House complex, it would be difficult to mitigate against those types of threats. Thankfully, we haven't seen anything like that. But you can't make the White House 100% security proof, because it is the people's house, and it is the White House where the President of the United States sits. So these are all the things that the Secret Service and the FBI and my former colleagues in the intelligence community have to continually look at to examine kind of what's the risk profile and what more can be done to minimize the risk.
So let me just read you. So according to the Secret Service, they put out a statement at 6 p.m. That individual, as you said, in the area of 17th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue, pulled a weapon from his bag and began firing. Secret Service returned fire, striking the suspect who has now been pronounced dead. So this kind of exchange, someone approaching the Secret Service or approaching that checkpoint, they saw him pull out a weapon, they engaged. Is that an example, Ali, of the system working, or is there more that needs to be done?
Well, I would say in the immediate protection of the White House complex, yes, the system worked. And there are Secret Service, uniformed Secret Service personnel, and perhaps now other law enforcement personnel, even National Guard folks, augmenting them at every spot along the way around the White House perimeter. This person went up to one of those checkpoints or station posts, and if you draw out a weapon and you open up on Secret Service or other law enforcement there, they are going to return fire, and that's apparently what happened. So the system worked as it was designed. But getting to the point of who this individual was, were they on any law enforcement radar screen before? This is a conversation we have every time we have one of these incidents. Who was the person? How long had they been radicalized, or had they been thinking about committing some kind of attack? Were there any warning signs? This is now all the hard work that's going on behind the scenes.
Javid, we've been reporting on a possible end to the war in Iran. There seems to be progress that the president is talking about in terms of negotiations with that country. Could that have played an ingredient in what we saw today?
We just don't know, Eli, unfortunately, because we just don't know, at least publicly, anything about this individual. And this person could have been thinking about doing it for weeks or months, and part of their motivation may have had nothing to do with the war against Iran. There could have been a whole set of factors driving them to this. And usually in this kind of ideologically or politically motivated violence, the radicalization process and then the mobilization to violence, it usually takes some time. It doesn't happen overnight. And there's always a combination of factors that drive people to making the choice of from being angry and then trying to do something and act out on it violently. So I would suspect that we're going to find out it was the same sort of drawn out process with this person, but we just don't know anything about them and all the different factors that drove them to this point.
Lots of questions to be answered. We'll certainly be watching. Thank you so much for your insights. That is Javed Ali. He's a former White House counterterrorism official who is now an associate professor at the University of Michigan.